Captain Zylara pressed her trembling claws against the communication console as the ship shuddered around her. The Galactic Federation vessel Times Peaceful Dawn Times was dying, its hull breached in 17 places, life support systems failing, and the crew of 200 slowly succumbing to the toxic atmosphere leaking from the enemy's bioweapons. Send the distress call again, she ordered her communications officer. Though they both knew it was useless. The Hive had cut off all standard Federation frequencies 3 solar cycles ago when they began their systematic extermination of the outer colonies. Lieutenant Corvin, his blue skin already showing the telltale purple spots of atmospheric poisoning, looked up from his station, with desperation in his large, dark eyes. Captain, no Federation ships can reach us in time. The nearest patrol is 4 systems away. Zylara's mind raced through their options. The Hive ships surrounded them like metallic wasps, each one bristling with organic weapons that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Their own defensive systems had been overwhelmed within minutes of the first attack. The peaceful species of the Federation had never encountered anything like the Hive before. A collective consciousness that viewed all other life as either food or obstacles to be removed. "What about the emergency frequencies?" she asked, grasping at hope. "The old military channels from the border wars?" Corvin's webbed fingers danced across his console. "Most are dead, Captain. But there's one. It's listed as Deathworlder Emergency Network. The classification is restricted, but I can break through." Deathworlders? Zylara had heard whispers about them in the Academy. Species that evolved on planets so hostile that merely surviving to develop space travel was considered miraculous by galactic standards. Most civilized species avoided them, finding their presence unsettling. Do we have any choice? Another impact rocked the ship, and emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red. Through the view screen, she could see Hive drones beginning to cut through their hull with bioacid. "Send the signal on all Deathworlder frequencies. Maximum power. Tell them." She paused, knowing that whatever response they received might be worse than the Hive. "Tell them that the Federation needs help. Transmit our coordinates and the nature of the threat." Corvin's claws clicked rapidly as he composed the message. Within moments, the transmission burst across subspace, seeking any Deathworlder vessel within range. The message was simple but carried the weight of desperation. Federation vessel under attack by hostile collective. Species designation: Hive. 200 souls aboard. Requesting immediate assistance. Will compensate any who respond. As the signal raced through the void, the bridge fell silent, except for the groaning of tortured metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere. The crew waited, knowing that help from Deathworlders would come with its own price, if it came at all. 3 light-years away, aboard the human dreadnought Times, Retribution, **. Communications. Specialist Maria Santos sat up straight in her chair. The automated systems had flagged an incoming distress call on the old military emergency network. And what she was reading made her blood run cold. "Commander Chen to the bridge," she called over the intercom, her voice steady despite the gravity of what she'd discovered. "Priority, Alpha, emergency signal." Commander David Chen arrived within minutes, his weathered face showing the kind of calm that came from decades of military service. Behind him came the ship's tactical officer, a stern woman named Rebecca Walsh, whose reputation for strategic brilliance was matched only by her reputation for ruthless efficiency. "Report," Chen ordered, settling into his command chair. Santos transferred the signal to the main display. "Distress call from a Federation vessel. They're under attack by something called the Hive." From the description, it sounds like a collective intelligence with bioweapons capability. Walsh leaned forward, studying the data scrolling across her tactical screen. "I'm reading energy signatures. Consistent with organic technology. Highly aggressive. The Federation ship's shields are already failing." Chen frowned. The Federation and humanity had maintained an uneasy peace for decades. They considered humans too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted with major roles in galactic politics. Humanity had been relegated to the outer rim, where their aggressive tendencies could be contained. Most Federation species genuinely believed that humans were barely civilized savages who had somehow stumbled into space travel. "Sir," Santos added, "there's something else. This hive, they're not just attacking that one ship. I'm detecting similar energy signatures across 17 different systems. This looks like a full-scale invasion." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. If an unknown hostile force was systematically attacking Federation space, it wouldn't be long before they reached human territory. And if the Federation fell, humanity would face this threat alone. "How long until we reach their coordinates?" Chen asked. Walsh checked her calculations. "At maximum burn, 37 minutes. But sir, we're a single ship. The tactical data suggests the attacking force consists of at least 40 vessels." Chen studied the distress signal again, noting the desperation in the alien captain's words. He thought about the Federation's treatment of humanity over the years, the condescending attitudes, the trade restrictions, the way they were excluded from important diplomatic decisions. It would be easy to ignore this call, to let the Federation deal with their own problems. But that wasn't the human way. Despite everything, when someone called for help, humans answered. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All available ships converge on these coordinates. Maximum burn." Santos looked confused. "Fleet, sir? The nearest human vessels are hours away." Chen smiled grimly. "Tell them it's an alpha priority response. Authorization code Phoenix Rising." Within moments, Santos was back on her communications array, sending coded signals across human space. The responses came quickly. Not from military vessels, but from cargo haulers, mining ships, exploration vessels, and even a few passenger liners. Each one acknowledged the priority code and began changing course toward the Federation ship's coordinates. "Commander," Walsh said carefully, "are you sure about this? Some of those ships aren't even armed." "They will be," Chen replied with certainty. "Send them the hive's energy signatures and tactical data. Tell them to prepare for hostile contact with unknown bioorganic technology." As the Time's retribution times accelerated toward the distress call, its crew began preparations for battle. In the ship's armory, weapons systems were brought online. In engineering, power was rerouted to shields and engines. In the medical bay, emergency trauma centers were prepared for casualties, but the most important preparations were happening in the minds of the crew. Each human aboard the ship was mentally shifting into a mode that their peaceful Federation neighbors had never truly understood. The mindset of a species that had clawed its way to the top of a hostile world's food chain. Meanwhile, scattered across human space, dozens of ships were making similar preparations. The cargo hauler Times, Iron Maiden Times, began strapping mining charges to hull-piercing drones. The exploration vessel Times, Curiosity Times, powered up its deep space sensor array to provide early warning and targeting data. The passenger liner Times, New Hope Times, evacuated its civilian passengers to evacuation pods and began converting its industrial fabricators to produce ammunition. Each ship was a small piece of humanity's response to the call for help, but together, they represented something the galaxy had never seen before. A human fleet, assembling not for conquest or territory, but simply because someone had asked for help. Back aboard the Times, Peaceful Dawn *, Captain Zilara watched in growing horror as hive drones finally breached their outer hull. The creatures that poured through the gap were nightmarish amalgamations of kitten and flesh, moving with the coordinated precision of a hive mind while dripping with bioacids that ate through metal. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, reported her tactical officer. "The drones are advancing toward the reactor core." Zilara made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life, assuming she survived the next few minutes. "Seal off those sections. Emergency bulkheads. Maximum security locks." Her crew stared at her in shock. There were still 43 crew members in those sections. "Captain," Corvin whispered, "we're sealing our own people in with those things. If they reach the reactor, "We all die," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "At least this way. Some of us might survive long enough for help to arrive." The bridge crew carried out her orders, with the heavy hearts of soldiers making impossible choices. On the sealed decks below, Federation crew members found themselves trapped with creatures from their darkest nightmares, fighting a hopeless battle with nothing but emergency hand weapons and determination. As the minutes passed, the sounds of battle gradually faded from the sealed sections. The crew on the bridge knew what that silence meant. "Captain," the sensor operator called out suddenly, "I'm reading new contacts. Multiple ships approaching fast." Zylara felt her heart skip a beat. "Federation reinforcements?" "Negative. The energy signatures. I've never seen anything like them. Highly aggressive propulsion systems, massive power outputs, and..." He paused, checking his readings twice. "Captain, some of these ships are moving fast enough to tear themselves apart. Whatever's piloting them doesn't seem to care about safety margins." Through the view screen, new stars began to appear. The engine signatures of ships dropping out of hyperspace at velocities that should have been impossible. The Hive fleet, which had been focusing entirely on finishing off the Time's peaceful dawn asterisk, suddenly found themselves facing an unknown force that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. The lead ship was massive, its hull bristling with weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. Behind it came vessels of every size and configuration, some clearly military, others obviously converted civilian craft. What they all had in common was an aggressive design philosophy that prioritized firepower and speed over comfort or elegance. "Open a channel," Zylara ordered, though she wasn't sure if she was about to be rescued or simply killed by a different enemy. The response came immediately, transmitted on basic galactic standard frequencies. The voice that emerged from her speakers was harsh, guttural, and spoke with an accent she'd never heard before. "Federation vessel. This is Commander Chen of the Terran Navy vessel Times Retribution asterisk. You called for help. We're here to provide it. Suggest you get clear of the hostile vessels immediately." "Terran Navy?" Zylara searched her memory of galactic politics but came up empty. She'd never heard of any species called Terrans. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Zylara of the Federation ship Times Peaceful Dawn asterisk. We are grateful for your response, but I should warn you, you are heavily outnumbered. The Hive has 43 vessels in this area alone." There was a pause, then what sounded disturbingly like laughter. "Captain, we're not here to even the odds. We're here to end this fight. All Federation vessels clear the battle area immediately. Terra Squad, weapons free. Light them up. 2, 2, 2, 2. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come, though few would ever truly understand what they were witnessing. Number, the SOS, that called the Deathworlder Armada, Part 2. The first salvo from the human fleet shattered the silence of space with a violence that registered on sensors 3 systems away. The Times Retribution's Times main guns opened fire with a sound that the Times Peaceful Dawn's Times crew felt in their bones despite the vacuum between ships. Streams of accelerated tungsten penetrators crossed the distance to the nearest Hive vessel at nearly light speed, striking its organic hull with kinetic energy that turned armor into plasma. Captain Zylara watched in stunned disbelief as the Hive ship simply disintegrated. One moment it had been a threatening mass of chitin and metal bristling with bioweapons. The next it was expanding debris and superheated gas. The humans had destroyed a vessel that her ship's weapons couldn't even scratch. "Impossible," breathed Lieutenant Corvin. "The energy readings. How are their weapons generating that much power?" The human response had apparently surprised the Hive as much as it had the Federation crew. For several crucial seconds, the collective consciousness seemed to hesitate, processing this new threat. In those seconds, the human fleet spread out in a formation that spoke of long experience with space combat. The cargo hauler Times Iron Maiden Times had somehow managed to mount what appeared to be military-grade missile launchers along its hull. Its captain, a gruff woman named Sarah McKenna, was coordinating with 3 other converted cargo vessels to establish a crossfire pattern that would make approach impossible for the Hive's smaller attack drones. Asterisk. Retribution. Asterisk. This is Time's Iron Maiden asterisk, came the voice over the tactical network. We've got eyes on their drone swarms. Recommend we clear the small fry while you handle the big boys. Acknowledged. Asterisk Iron Maiden asterisk. Watch your 6. Their bioacids can eat through standard cargo hull plating. Copy that. We've jury-rigged ablative armor from our reactor shielding. Should buy us a few minutes. The conversation was happening in the middle of a space battle. Yet the human captains spoke with the casual efficiency of construction workers coordinating a building project. Zilara found their calm in the face of overwhelming odds both inspiring and terrifying. The Hive fleet, recovering from their initial shock, began to respond with the coordinated precision that made them so deadly. Bio-weapon pods launched from the larger vessels, each one seeking the nearest human ship like living missiles. The organic projectiles pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. The humans' response revealed why they were called Deathworlders. Instead of trying to evade the biomissiles, the human ships accelerated directly toward them. Point defense systems opened fire with streams of hypervelocity projectiles that turned the approaching weapons into clouds of organic debris. When one biomissile managed to penetrate the defensive fire and strike the exploration vessel Time's Curiosity asterisk, the crew didn't panic or retreat. Asterisk Curiosity Times to Fleet Command, came a steady voice. Bioweapon impact on our starboard hull. Hull breach contained. Acid damage minimal. The stuff doesn't seem to like our titanium steel composite armor. Continuing engagement. Quote. HE. Quote. Zilara realized that these humans had designed their ships expecting to be hit, expecting to take damage, and expecting to keep fighting anyway. It was a military philosophy completely alien to the Federation's approach of avoiding conflict whenever possible. The passenger liner Times New Hope Times had moved to the edge of the battle area, its converted industrial fabricators working at maximum capacity. Within minutes, it was launching supply drones loaded with ammunition and replacement parts toward the other human vessels. The captain, an elderly man named Robert Foster, had turned his luxury cruise ship into a mobile resupply depot. All units. This is Times New Hope asterisk, Foster announced calmly. Fresh ammunition packages available. Also have medical supplies and emergency rations if anyone needs them. Try not to get yourselves killed out there. The casual way he discussed life and death made Zylara's scales crawl. These humans spoke about war the way her people discussed weather patterns. The Hive was adapting quickly to the human tactics, as collective intelligences do. The larger bioships began releasing clouds of corrosive organisms designed to eat through ship hulls from the inside out. The microscopic creatures were too small for point defense systems to target effectively. Commander Chen watched the tactical display as the biological weapon clouds approached his fleet. All ships, seal atmosphere systems, and switch to internal life support. Deploy countermeasures. Pattern Omega-7. What happened next demonstrated why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most feared warriors. Instead of trying to avoid the bioweapon clouds, the human ships released their own countermeasures. Clouds of Earth bacteria that had been specifically engineered to consume organic materials in zero-gravity environments. The 2 biological weapon systems met in the space between the fleets and engaged in microscopic warfare. The human bacteria, evolved in one of the galaxy's most competitive biospheres, proved superior to the Hive organisms. Within minutes, the Hive's bioweapon clouds were being systematically devoured by Earth microbes. How is that possible? Zilara whispered, watching the sensor readings. Her science officer, Dr. Vex, was studying the same data with growing amazement. Captain, those humans brought bacteria specifically designed to counter biological weapons. They came prepared for every type of warfare imaginable. The Hive fleet was beginning to show signs of concern. Several of the larger bioships pulled back, apparently communicating with the collective consciousness about this unexpected threat. The smaller attack vessels pressed their assault, but human point defense systems were proving devastatingly effective against targets evolved for use against Federation-style energy shields. The mining ship times Deep Digger times had positioned itself near an asteroid field left over from an ancient planetary collision. Its captain, a stocky woman named Maria Santos, was using mining charges as improvised weapons with terrifying effectiveness. Asterisk Deep Digger times to all units, she announced cheerfully. I've got a dozen hive drones chasing me through the asteroids, about to give them a lesson in explosive mining techniques. The sensor display showed the mining ship weaving between massive chunks of rock, while hive drones pursued in perfect formation. Suddenly, dozens of the asteroids exploded simultaneously, creating a debris field that shredded the pursuing drones like paper. Mining charges placed 6 hours ago, Santos explained casually. Sometimes it pays to think ahead. 6 hours ago? Zylara realized that the humans had been planning this battle since long before they arrived. They hadn't just responded to the distress call. They had analyzed the tactical situation, prepared countermeasures for unknown enemies, and arrived ready for any type of conflict. The Hive Collective was reaching the same conclusion. The larger bioships began falling back, apparently recognizing that this was not the easy victory they had expected. But the humans weren't content to simply drive them off. All units, this is Time's Retribution asterisk. Commander Chen's voice carried across the fleet network with cold determination. Hostile forces are attempting to withdraw. Do not allow them to escape. These things have been systematically destroying Federation colonies. We end this here. 10. These things. The human fleet surged forward in pursuit, their ships accelerating beyond what should have been safe operational limits. The Times, Retribution Times, led the charge, its massive engines pushing it faster and faster, despite the structural stress indicators screaming warnings. Sir, called the ship's chief engineer over the comm, we're redlining everything. Hull stress is approaching critical levels. Understood, Chen replied calmly. Keep us together for 10 more minutes. That's all we need. The human pursuit caught the hive ships at the edge of the system, just as they were preparing to jump to hyperspace. The Times Retribution's Times main guns spoke again, reaching across impossible distances to cripple the largest hive vessel, just as its jump drive activated. The result was a catastrophic hyperspace failure that tore a hole in local space-time. The hive ship was scattered across 3 dimensions, taking 2 smaller vessels with it, in a display of destruction that registered on gravitational sensors across the sector. Asterisk Retribution Times to all units, Chen announced. Hostile fleet neutralized. Casualty report. The responses came back quickly. The Times, Iron Maiden Times had taken hull damage but was operational. The Times Curiosity Times needed minor repairs. The Times Deep Digger Times was completely undamaged and asking permission to salvage useful materials from the destroyed hive ships. Most remarkably, not a single human life had been lost in the engagement. Captain Zylara found herself staring at sensor readings that defied everything she thought she knew about space combat. A hastily assembled fleet of converted civilian ships had just destroyed a hive battle group that had been systematically conquering Federation space for months. Federation vessel, Times Peaceful Dawn, asterisk, came Commander Chen's voice over the communication channel. Are you in need of assistance? Our medical teams are standing by if you have casualties. Zylara looked around her bridge at crew members still showing the effects of bioweapon poisoning, at damaged systems and failing life support. We would be grateful for any help you can provide. We have 43 confirmed casualties in our sealed sections, and our life support systems are failing. Understood. We're dispatching rescue teams immediately. Our doctors have experience treating bioweapon exposure. Within minutes, human shuttles were docking with the Times Peaceful Dawn asterisk. The rescue teams that came aboard were unlike anything Zylara had ever seen. They wore powered armor that made them look like mechanical giants, and they carried medical equipment that seemed decades ahead of Federation technology. The lead medic was a tall woman whose nameplate read Dr. Richardson. She moved through the damaged ship with the confidence of someone who had seen far worse situations. Captain, she said to Zylara, We're reading massive atmospheric contamination throughout your ship. How long have you been breathing this air? 3 hours. Maybe 4, Zylara replied weakly. The purple spots on her skin were spreading, and she was having trouble focusing her thoughts. Doctor. Richardson immediately began setting up some kind of atmospheric processor. You're lucky you called when you did. Another hour, and the nerve damage would have been permanent. Hold still. This is going to feel strange. The device she activated filled the air with a fine mist that tasted like earth rain. Within minutes, Zylara felt her thoughts clearing, and the burning in her lungs beginning to fade. How? She asked. Our doctors said bioweapon poisoning was irreversible. It is, if you don't have the right countermeasures. Doctor, Richardson replied matter-of-factly. We've been fighting biological warfare since before we reached space. Earth is a very hostile place. It taught us to be prepared for everything. Other human rescue teams were working throughout the ship, their equipment easily handling problems that Federation technology couldn't solve. The sealed sections where crew members had been trapped with hive drones were carefully breached, revealing scenes of carnage that would haunt the survivors for years. But amazingly, 17 of the trapped crew members were still alive, barely. And the human medics immediately went to work saving them with the same calm efficiency they had shown in battle. As the Times' peaceful dawn times slowly returned to operational status under human care, Captain Zylara found herself in the unusual position of trying to thank people who had just saved her ship, her crew, and quite possibly the entire Federation from an existential threat. Commander Chen, she said over the communication link, I don't know how to thank you. Without your intervention, we would all be dead, and the Hive would have continued their advance into Federation space. There was a pause before Chen replied. Captain, you don't need to thank us. You sent out a call for help, and we responded. That's what people do. But why? The Federation has not always been welcoming to your species. We've restricted your trade, excluded you from our councils, treated you as second-class members of the galactic community. Another pause, longer this time. Captain, we're human. When someone calls for help, we answer. It doesn't matter what they've done to us in the past. It doesn't matter if they've been fair or unfair. When people are in danger and they ask for help, we help them. That's just who we are. The simple honesty in his voice brought tears to Zylara's eyes. Here was a species that the Federation had dismissed as violent savages, and they had just demonstrated a nobility that shamed the supposedly civilized races. But as the human fleet began to disperse, returning to their original missions as if the devastating battle had been a minor interruption, long-range sensors began detecting something that would change everything. The Hive attack on the Times' peaceful dawn times hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been a probe, testing Federation defenses before the main invasion force arrived. And that main invasion force was now only days away from Federation core worlds. Number: the SOS that called the Deathworlder Armada. Part 3. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council had been called within hours of Captain Zylara's initial report reaching Federation Central Command. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Gallos Prime, their various forms of communication, creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, harmonics, and translated speech that filled the vast chamber. Ambassador Thylex of the Altarian Collective stood at the central podium, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns as he addressed the assembly. Fellow beings, we face an existential crisis. The Hive has launched a full-scale invasion of our space. Preliminary reports indicate over 300 systems are under attack. Panicked conversations erupted throughout the chamber. The Federation had never faced anything like this before. Their military doctrine was based on peacekeeping and defensive actions, not the kind of total warfare that the Hive represented. Ambassador Korvash of the Selenite Republic raised one of his many appendages for attention. What of our defensive fleets? Surely our combined forces can repel these invaders. Thylex's response dimmed the lights reflecting from his crystalline body. Our defensive fleets have engaged Hive forces in 17 separate battles. In every case, we have suffered catastrophic losses while inflicting minimal damage on the enemy. Their biotechnology is simply superior to our energy-based weapon systems. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Federation, despite its advanced technology and vast resources, was losing the war. However, Thylex continued, there has been one notable exception. A single Federation vessel was attacked by a Hive battle group, and not only survived, but was successfully defended by Allied forces. Ambassador Vex Tar of the Hegemony Council leaned forward on his floating platform. Allied forces? Which member species responded to the distress call? That is complicated, Thylex admitted. The rescue was performed by vessels belonging to a species that operates on the galactic periphery. They call themselves humans, and they claim to represent something called the Terran Federation. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Most of the assembled representatives had heard of humans, though few had ever encountered them directly. They were classified as a Deathworlder species, beings who had evolved on a planet so hostile that their entire development had been shaped by constant warfare and survival against impossible odds. Ambassador Korvash consulted his datapad. Humans. I have the file here. Classification. Extreme aggression, territorial behavior, persistent warfare, even among their own species. The psychological evaluation recommends minimal contact to avoid diplomatic incidents. Regardless of our past assessments, Thylex responded firmly, they destroyed an entire Hive battle group with minimal casualties. Captain Xylara's report indicates they employed tactical knowledge and weapons technology that far exceeds our current capabilities. The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives argued that involving humans would be like inviting predators to solve a pest problem. The cure might be worse than the disease. Others pointed out that they were facing extinction and couldn't afford to be choosy about their allies. Ambassador Lithia of the Pacifist Coalition spoke for many when she said, we cannot compromise our principles by allying with a species known for violence and aggression. There must be another solution. What solution? Demanded Ambassador Horth of the mining guilds. Our people are dying. Entire worlds are being consumed by these creatures. The humans destroyed 43 Hive vessels without losing a single being. Can you say the same about any of our engagements? As the debate raged, a new voice cut through the arguments. Admiral Nexus of the Federation Defense Force, a veteran officer whose species rarely spoke in council sessions, activated his translation matrix. Honored representatives, while you debate philosophy, I am receiving real-time reports from the front lines. The Hive main fleet has been detected 3 days out from Centauri Prime. They number in the thousands. Our combined defensive forces can muster perhaps 200 vessels, and based on current engagement ratios, we can expect to destroy maybe 50 of their ships before being overwhelmed. The chamber fell silent as the math became clear. Furthermore, Admiral Nexus continued, I have been monitoring human communication networks since the incident at Captain Xylara's coordinates. Their response to the crisis has been illuminating. He activated the chamber's main display, showing a tactical map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated known Hive positions, while blue showed Federation forces, but scattered throughout human space were thousands of green markers, all moving toward the battle zones. These are human vessels responding to what they call alpha priority signals. Military ships, cargo haulers, exploration vessels, mining craft, even passenger liners. Within 6 hours of the first distress call, the humans have mobilized what appears to be their entire space-capable fleet. Ambassador Vextar studied the display in amazement. How many ships? Conservative estimate? 15,000 vessels of various classes. They're organizing into battle groups and moving to intercept Hive forces at multiple points along their advance. The numbers were staggering. The Federation's entire military consisted of fewer than 3,000 ships, and most of those were designed for peacekeeping rather than warfare. The humans were fielding 5 times that number, and every one of them was apparently configured for combat. But surely, Ambassador Lithia protested, most of those are civilian vessels. They can't possibly be effective against military targets. Admiral Nexus highlighted several of the human ships on the display. According to our sensors, the humans have been converting their civilian vessels for combat at an unprecedented rate. Cargo ships are mounting weapon systems. Passenger liners are serving as mobile supply depots. And mining vessels are deploying what can only be described as improvised weapons of mass destruction. He paused, studying data streams that continued to update in real time. There's something else. The human response isn't being coordinated by their government or military command structure. These are individual captains and crews making their own decisions to join the fight. They're volunteering. The implications of that statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. The Federation Council had to debate for hours before making any decision. And even then, member species often refused to commit resources to conflicts that didn't directly threaten them. The humans had mobilized their entire civilization in a matter of hours, and they were doing it voluntarily. Ambassador Thylex spoke into the stunned silence. Honored colleagues, we have a decision to make. We can maintain our principles and face the hive alone, knowing that we will likely lose. Or, we can request assistance from a species that has already demonstrated the capability to defeat our enemy. And what would such assistance cost us? Demanded Ambassador Korvash. What price would these humans demand for their help? Thylex consulted his notes. According to Commander Chen of the human vessel that rescued Captain Zylara, humans help because it's the right thing to do. They have made no demands for payment or territorial concessions. The debate that followed lasted for several hours. But the outcome was inevitable. Faced with extinction, even the most pacifistic species in the Federation eventually voted to request human assistance. The formal request was transmitted to human space within hours, addressed to their government on a planet called Earth. The response came back so quickly that Federation communicators wondered if the humans had been expecting the call. Federation Council. This is Admiral Sarah Martinez of the Terran Defense Force. We have received your request for assistance and are honored to provide aid. However, we must inform you that our fleets are already en route to engage Hive forces. Human ships will be defending Federation space, whether you officially request it or not. We help because it's who we are. 3 days later, the largest space battle in galactic history began at Centauri Prime. The Hive main fleet dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find a lightly defended Federation world ripe for conquest. Instead, they found themselves facing a combined force of human and Federation vessels, arranged in a defensive formation that spoke of careful planning and coordination. The human contingent was massive, over 8,000 ships of every conceivable type, from military dreadnoughts to converted fishing boats. What struck Federation observers was not just the size of the human fleet, but the diversity. Every ship was different, modified and customized by crews who understood their vessels intimately. Admiral Martinez commanded from the human flagship Times, Terra's Fury Asterisk, a massive battleship that bristled with weapons systems the Federation didn't recognize. Her tactical network included not just military vessels but civilian captains who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. Federation Fleet, this is Admiral Martinez. Her voice carried across the combined fleet. Thank you for allowing us to fight alongside you. Today we face an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy. Human and Federation crews will fight together, die together if necessary, and win together. Captain Zylara, commanding a hastily repaired Times Peaceful Dawn Asterisk, felt tears in her eyes at the simple sincerity in the human admiral's voice. Around her, Federation ships that had been fleeing from Hive forces for months were preparing for battle alongside warriors who had traveled halfway across the galaxy to help them. The Hive fleet, numbering over 3,000 vessels, began their attack with the coordinated precision that had made them so feared. Bioweapon pods filled space between the fleets, while organic ships pulsed with bioluminescent targeting systems. The human response was immediate and devastating. Every converted civilian ship opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of kinetic energy that turned the approaching bioweapons into clouds of organic debris. Military vessels launched waves of missiles that seemed to think for themselves, adjusting course to target hive ships with precision that defied explanation. But it was the human tactics that truly shocked both sides in the battle. Instead of maintaining formation and trading fire at long range like civilized species, the humans charged. 8,000 ships accelerated toward the hive fleet at velocities that should have torn them apart. Point defense systems created streams of fire that turned space into a lethal maze of energy and projectiles. Human captains pushed their ships beyond every safety limit, maintaining course even as hull plating glowed white-hot from atmospheric friction during combat maneuvers. The mining ship Times Deep Strike Times rammed a hive biocruiser at ramming speed, its reinforced hull designed for asteroid impacts punching through organic armor, like a spear through flesh. As the ship died, its captain triggered mining charges throughout the hive vessel, destroying both ships in an explosion that could be seen from the planet's surface. The cargo hauler, Times Iron Will Times, had been converted into a missile platform, its cargo bays filled with military ordnance. When hive boarding pods breached its hull, the crew didn't retreat. Instead, they fought the invading creatures hand-to-hand in the ship's corridors, while continuing to fire missiles at external targets. Throughout the human fleet, similar scenes played out. Crews who had been transporting goods or exploring distant systems the week before were now fighting the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever seen, with a ferocity that left both Federation and Hive forces stunned. The Hive Collective, for the first time in its existence, encountered something it couldn't understand or adapt to: the human concept of sacrifice for others. The collective consciousness simply couldn't process why beings would die to defend strangers, why individuals would give their lives for abstract concepts like freedom or justice. As the battle raged, the Hive began to make tactical errors. Ships broke formation to pursue individual human vessels. Collective decision-making became confused as different parts of the fleet pursued conflicting objectives. The unified intelligence that made them so dangerous was fragmenting under the psychological impact of facing an enemy that fought without regard for personal survival. Admiral Martinez, watching the tactical display, recognized the moment when the tide turned. All units, this is Times Terra's Fury **. Hostile fleet is showing signs of coordination breakdown. Press the attack. Show them what happens when they threaten innocent people. The human fleet surged forward in a final coordinated assault that swept the remaining Hive vessels from the system. When the last enemy ship was destroyed, the combined human and Federation fleet had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history: the complete destruction of a Hive invasion force. The cost had been terrible. Nearly 2,000 human ships had been destroyed or severely damaged. Tens of thousands of human crew members had died fighting an enemy they had never seen before to defend people they had never met. But they had won. In the aftermath of the battle, as rescue operations began and the wounded were treated, Captain Zylara found herself aboard the human flagship. Admiral Martinez, a scarred woman whose uniform was torn and blood-stained from the battle, was coordinating relief efforts with the same calm efficiency she had shown in combat. "Admiral," Zylara said quietly, "I wanted to thank you personally. Your people saved not just my ship, but our entire civilization." Sighed. "No. See." Martinez looked up from her tactical displays, and Zylara saw exhaustion and grief in her eyes. "Captain, your thanks aren't necessary. We did what anyone should do when innocent people are threatened. But the cost," Zylara pressed. "So many of your people died for strangers. How do you justify such sacrifice?" Martinez was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the debris field, where so many brave souls had given their lives. "Captain, humans have a saying: greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Today, we made friends with an entire galaxy. I'd say that was worth the price." As news of the victory spread across Federation space, a new understanding began to take root. The species they had dismissed as violent savages were, in fact, the most noble warriors the galaxy had ever seen. They fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple principle that those who could help others should help them. The hive threat was far from over. Scattered fleets still menaced the outer systems, and the collective consciousness was already adapting to human tactics. But something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Humanity had announced its arrival on the galactic stage not as conquerors or merchants, but as protectors. And across Federation space, beings who had lived in terror for months finally slept peacefully, knowing that somewhere out there, human ships stood guard against the darkness. The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's guardians, and the stars themselves seemed brighter for their presence.